Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We'll get started in just a minute, giving everyone a chance to come on in. All right, I will go ahead and get us started this evening. And then we'll jump right in. I'm sure we will continue to see some individuals coming in as we go, but we want to make sure that we have enough time to get through all this wonderful music. So hello, everyone. My name is Lori Black. I'm the Associate Director of the Lowell Milken Center for Music of American Jewish Experience here at the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music. And this is more or less marking the one-year anniversary of the Jewish Music Masterclass series, a unique series that came out of necessity and has continued throughout the year and continued going strong. We are thrilled to have you join us for music and conversation with tonight's guest, Julia Adolphe. To make sure that you know about all of our programming related to music of the American Jewish Experience, please make sure you're on our event email list. You'll find the link to the mailing list in the chat below, or simply Google UCLA Jewish Music, and you'll find the link to our webpage there. That is, to this day, still how I handle that. Our next program is March 25th at 5 p.m. PST, and will be, I should say, and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and will be a fun discussion with klezmer clarinetist Michael Winograd, exploring the albums he has created from his apartment while in quarantine. And it's an amazing dive into the roles and intersections of klezmer and humor and just what it means to have fun and bring a community together around music. So I hope you'll all join us for that. If you have any questions for Julia Adolphe during the program, please feel free to put them in the chat or hold on to them till the end, and you can ask them directly. And now on to our program. Julia Adolphe's music is described as alive with invention by the New Yorker, colorful, mercurial, deftly orchestrated by the New York Times, displaying a remarkable gift for sustaining a compelling musical narrative by Musical America. Her works are performed across the US and abroad by renowned orchestras and ensembles such as the New York Philharmonic, Los Angeles Philharmonic, Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, New World Symphony, Belgian National Orchestra, Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, Brooklyn Youth Chorus, Verona Quartet, soprano Hila Plitmann, and pianist Gloria Cheng, among many others. Current commissions include an orchestral work for the Boston Symphony Orchestra, a violin concerto for Gustavo Dudamel and the LA Philharmonic featuring concertmaster Martin Chalafour. Adolphe's comic opera for all ages, A Barrel of Laughs, A Veil of Tears, based on the novel of Jules Pfeiffer with libretto by Stephanie Fleischman, received initial workshops directed by Elkanah Pulitzer at National Sawdust and Boston Court, Pasadena in 2019. Adolphe's 2017 orchestral work, White Stone, premiered to the New York Philharmonic, followed on the heels of the New York Philharmonic's 2016 premiere of Unearthed Release, Adolphe's viola concerto composed for Cynthia Phelps, and Dark Sand Sifting Light, featured during the 2014 New York Phil Biennial. Julia Adolphe is the creator, producer, and host of the podcast Loose Leaf Notebook, which uncovers the connections between creativity and mental health and works towards destigmatizing mental illness. Adolphe's awards include a 2017 ASCAP Young Composers Award, a 2016 Lincoln Center Emerging Artist Award, a 2016 Opera America Discovery Grant, and a 2015 Charles Ives Scholarship from the Academy of Arts and Letters. A native New Yorker living in Los Angeles, Adolphe holds a Master's of Music degree in Music Composition from the USC Thornton School of Music and a Bachelor of Arts degree from Cornell University. Julia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, for anyone that's joining us for the first time in the Jewish Music Masterclass, one of the amazing things about this program is not just diving into one's career, but looking at how it connects to you Jewishly, how your career and art and Jewishness all intersect. And the first work that we're going to look at today Smile Softly, Softly Smile, you note that it's inspired by memories and traditions. What a wonderful way to kick us off. I wonder if maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the work, and then we'll go ahead and listen to it, and we'll dive in just a little deeper after listening.
Sure. So this piece is for solo violin, and the violinist Evgeny Kutik, he approached me. It was in April of 2020, so it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, while we were all trying to understand what was about to happen and what was happening, and he asked if I wanted to write him a solo piece. And so I was really excited just to have something to work on, because everything had been postponed. And I was also really touched by his premise, which was that he wanted it to be, he has a collection of pieces that are basically inspired by family photographs. So that was sort of the prompt. And really, what was sort of keeping me going and keeping me sane for most of this pandemic, but especially at the beginning, was staying connected to my family, staying connected to my partner Zach here in Los Angeles, to my parents in New York City, and so the piece is kind of a lullaby. I kind of wrote it to comfort myself, and the premise was sort of imagining the photo I picked was actually a photograph. I think you'll see it in the video. A photograph of my partner Zach as a newborn. And so the idea was that it's kind of an imagined lullaby to a future child, and so the lyricism of it, I think, very much evokes. Well, no, we'll get into that later. Let's just
Okay. All right. Thank you. astounding writing. Really, really amazing. The first time I listened to this, when you sent it to me, I was blown away. And especially now, having heard you describe where it was coming from a place of where we all were, which was isolation. Gosh, it makes so much more sense. But I want to let you expand on it, please.
Sure. Well, I was sort of imagining this lullaby, and I found that I really was gravitating towards more modal tonal music. And this is what sort of connects to, I think, my Jewish voice and the influence of cantoral music and the music that I used to hear in temple. I didn't spend a lot of time in temple, but when I did, I was very much, I used to sing with the cantor actually, and I really loved that as a kid. And so I think there's definitely some of that Jewish modal influence in, the first part is very chromatic, but then there's this sort of, it lands in this kind of warm place. And then I think there's also sort of a blend of a little bit of like American folk sound. And that's sort of my nod to my partner, Zach. So I think that's kind of the two strands that you hear in that piece.
Almost in a nostalgic way, kind of distant and spaced out. It's very, very fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. So the next work, which hopefully we'll be able to hear a few segments of, is part of a larger work, Barrel of Laughs. So I wonder if you could just set us up a little bit for what the larger work is, and in this particular segment that we'll be hearing, what's taking place.
Yeah. So this opera, A Barrel of Laughs, A Vale of Tears, is based on this book, which was, I guess it might be backwards in, in the Zoom, but it was my favorite, one of my favorite books as a kid growing up. And my dad, read it to me. And I actually started writing little songs inspired by it back when I was a child. So it's something that's been in my head for a long time. And I actually got to meet Jules Pfeiffer, who's the author of it. He came, growing up in New York City. I think it was his granddaughter that went to my elementary school or something. And so he came and read from the book, and I got it autographed. And I just remember, I was pretty young. I think I was about 8. And so it was my first time like meeting an author of a book that I loved, and it was just so exciting. And so anyway, I've always wanted to write this opera based on this book, and I reached out to him. I found his email address online after a quick Google search, and wrote to him. He's about 93, maybe 92. Incredible Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist, who many of you are probably familiar with. So he gave me the full rights for the dramatic adaptation. And then I found a wonderful librettist, Stephanie Fleischman, who wrote the libretto for this. And so, opera takes a long time to put together. So we've been working on it since 2017, and we'll see this excerpt from the 2019 performance. But the basic premise of the book and the opera is that Izzy, who is this royal who's supposed to ascend the throne, she has this curse where basically if you're within 20 miles from her, you just fall to the floor laughing. So as a result, no one in the kingdom can get anything done. And she's very much, a blight on the kingdom. And so she's sent off on a quest. And it's very absurd and quizzical. And she basically, as the title suggests, learns kind of how to hold both the joy and the sorrow of life. And she starts out in this very innocent place, kind of like a Peter Pan character, where she just can't she just kind of can't be touched, right? She's just always joyful. And it's kind of about how she becomes an adult and learn what that means. So in this excerpt, this is kind of at the crux of her realizing that, life is not what she thought it was. And you'll hear a wonderful soprano who's actually here tonight watching, Maggie Finnegan, and the Brooklyn Youth Chorus, which is a great children's chorus. So you'll hear them, and basically she's asking herself the question, what is meanness? So. Oh, it was almost over.
Oh, I'm sorry, I cut it early.
Okay.
Um, oh gosh. Well, let's jump into it. Forgive me. Um, can I ask? I mean it's such a moving segment, and I mean, it really pulls you in. I'm hung up on the way you set. There was one of the final lines that we just heard. Is meanness scored into the scars of the scapegoat, I believe. And the way you set it as just this stunning choral moment, sung by the children, by the children's chorus. I mean, that's having gotten to know your music. I mean, everything seems very, very intentional, and that was clearly a very intentional moment. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that moment, because it's powerful. I mean, I think that kind of sums up in some ways the emotionality of the segment.
Yeah, thanks. I was thinking about this piece in the context of this class and thinking about how it relates to my Jewish identity, which is, not something that I'm consciously thinking about every day, but it's definitely in there. And I was thinking about, sort of one of my favorite traditions of Passover was this idea of, the child kind of leading the service and children being encouraged to ask questions. And part of the framework of this piece actually is the idea that this child who you saw standing next to Maggie, to Izzy, he's really actually kind of guiding the story and asking all of these questions. And so the idea is that it's this child kind of trying to learn, why life is hard. That's kind of what the bulk of that aria is. Why are people mean? Why are people cruel? And that just feels very authentic to me, I guess, in terms of, I think, what values are instilled, particularly in Passover. So yeah, I think it's just that moment of just children's choir exposed, no instruments. It's just supposed to be this kind of pure innocence. And I think Stephanie, wrote a beautiful line, giving a possible answer as to why people are mean.
Wonderful. And I apologize for not playing the whole thing, but this seems like a perfect moment to mention that Julia has a fantastic YouTube channel that has all of this material. And if you want to go and check it out yourself, here is the YouTube channel found in the chat. So please do, and I'll take this moment as well to put Julia's website as well.
Thank you.
I've got to cover my mistakes somehow. So now we're going to change the sound of what we're hearing just a little bit, jumping into another work, a fascinating instrumental work. Surface tension. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about it and the dialogue within, and we'll explore it afterward.
Sure. So this is a very short movement it's the second movement of my viola concerto, which I wrote for Cynthia Phelps and the New York Philharmonic. And this movement I wanted to highlight in particular because it's very playful, and A Barrel of Laughs, A Veil of Tears is a comedy, but I didn't play you a very funny moment. But this is kind of a moment where the viola and the orchestra are kind of playing and teasing one another, but there's also sort of an undercurrent of maybe aggression or sarcasm. This kind of like this witty banter with maybe some little undercutting of sarcastic quality. I think very consciously about what conversations and characters I'm trying to set into my music, even when there's no voice or there's no text. To me, that's just the most exciting thing. I've just always loved storytelling. So I think you'll hear that in Surface Tension.
It's so much fun the way you play with this sense of instability, almost like almost always trying to find the groove but never quite settling. um and it's also just incredible what you can do when you have an orchestra that can play anything you put in front of them.
I know. It's a very hard piece.
Yeah, I was I was that was a frenetic take on the on the classic scherzo. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I imagine getting the part. But wow, what a wonderful work. And it really does take you on a journey. As you said, while it might not be programmatically storytelling in this sense, you really are taken on a journey, and you can hear the different voices the way they interplay, sometimes playing off of each other, sometimes completely independent. So it was wonderful. And I'd be curious, is that work as well fully available on YouTube, or is there a way to buy an album or anything similar to that?
Yes, the album is out, from the New York Philharmonic, and it's also on YouTube for free. They put it up there. So depending on if you like, hard copies or not.
I will be the one to always push for individuals to purchase music and help create more music. So we're going to steer away a little bit from your repertoire for a second to talk about one of the new and really exciting projects that you have been focused on, the Loose Leaf Notebook podcast, available on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast platforms, I suppose.
All of them, yeah.
Okay. Well, here, I'm going to go ahead and put the link for Apple Podcasts if anyone is interested. And would you mind just telling us a little bit about the podcast and how it came to be, and how it occupies such an incredibly important place in classical music?
Thanks.
I will say that.
Okay. Thank you. So this has definitely come out of the pandemic, this project, with basically, my orchestral commissions being postponed, and now they're being rescheduled. But, sort of this no end in sight, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to put my creative energy. And really, this started out of wanting to share my own strategies for dealing with the uncertainty and stressors and anxiety of the pandemic, and trying to create art during that time. And so it started from this sort of mental health and creativity kind of more broadly, but very quickly it became what I realized was, important to me to be my outlet to talk about my own experience with generalized anxiety disorder. And it's something that I've wanted to talk about publicly for a long time, because there is a lot of stigma around, mental illness, mental health disorders. I would say, therapy is not as stigmatized within the Jewish community. It was definitely my parents were very supportive of my doing therapy, and I feel like everyone I knew was a therapist growing up. But, in the sort of broader American culture, it's still very much stigmatized. And I think talking about mental health is hard for all of us. It just is. So the idea was really to talk about mental health publicly and to have guests come on. So I've had some wonderful guests. Most recently, I had wonderful composer Sarah Kirkland Snyder come on, and I've just had different composers and artists in the field come and talk about their experience. And part of it is also this idea of, I think we have an idea of the tortured, suffering artist, and that is something that we should aspire to. And, in school, we don't learn anything about creative, like healthy creative habits. And, there's sort of this divide between academic craft and all the emotional work that actually goes into writing. So it's been something I just started for fun, to keep myself from going nuts. And it was also a really nice way to stay connected with with my community and to sort of find a way. I was really trying to figure out a way to give back and stay present during this year.
Is
And
it
it was just picked up by New Music USA, New Music Box, which within the contemporary music world, is sort of like their journal.
Mazel Tov?
Thank you. So, yeah, so it's growing and I'm excited to see where it
So,
goes.
what have you? Is there anything that you would say you've, in particular, that you've learned about the classical music community or yourself in a project like this, where it really is about teaching people about yourself, but also, trying to start a conversation? I'm curious what interesting things have come out of the podcast.
I mean, there's a lot, so I'm trying to think of the short answer to that
Fair
question.
enough.
Um, I think it's still shocking to me how much shame is still around this idea of, needing help in some way. We think, especially classical music, I think thinks that it's has progressive ideals, and a lot of this year has, pointed out otherwise. And I think that it's interesting to see, how common I think a lot of these anxiety is something that we all experience, in forms. That it becomes, for me, when it's a chemical imbalance that needs medication, it's more. I talk about this a lot on the podcast. I don't want to
Sure.
let go,
No, sure. I
but
just wanted to,
it's
yeah.
it's but basically the podcast is examining how it exists for people in daily life, in pandemic life, and then also if potentially you have a disorder, and sort of all of that intersection with how you make art and how you sort of separate your anxious thoughts or from your art, or how you get motivated if you're feeling depressed. I think all of these things have a place in university, in conservatory. Yeah, and it's just so unexplored within classical music. I think that's what I'm learning is that it's really unexplored.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot about classical music that kind of runs under the surface. And I, as a classical musician, I appreciate the work that you do. So if anyone is interested, please do have a listen to Loose Leaf One Word podcast, found on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. So with that, let's go ahead and jump back into the music. We can, based on time, it's always the tricky thing, judging how the time is going to run, but things are looking good right now. Should we go to the sculpture aria
I
or
think
jump
we
to
could
Kilo
do
Kilo?
Kilo Kilo or a funnier opera excerpt.
Well, I think we have time for both.
Okay.
um Perfect. So I have Kilo Kilo queued up here
Let's do that.
from Star-Crossed Signals. um and this one was actually really interesting to me, and it was as went through all of these, learning how so much of your music involves an element of communication, or exploring communication. um do you want to cue that up just a little bit, or should we talk about that after listening?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, so this is a string quartet. The title is actually an homage to, my dad, Jonathan's paintings. So he uses a lot of, or he used to use Navy signal flags in his paintings, and his work also sort of is involved around communication. And so this is sort of so Kilo Kilo means I wish to communicate, and it's sort of the voices kind of looking for each other.
A remarkable work. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick second because it was already starting to get asked in the chat, and we mentioned it, but this music is amazing, and I'm sure that there are other musicians like us who want to perform it. How might one, gain access to sheet music scores, things of that nature?
Yeah, so I'm self-published, so all of my music is just at my website, juliaadolphe.com, and I do have scores up there that you can look at, and everything that I'm legally allowed to share is up for free. But then, my email is there as well, so you can always just write to me.
That's Thank you for that. And thank you for that work. So I think we have time for one more work before we open it up to questions. And I do want to make sure that I mention right now, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to ask it yourself, hold on to it. We're going to open it up at the end. So please do be thinking about what you would like to ask. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say if we could do the opera, the scene from the opera,
Absolutely.
and you can just cut it off, when we run out of time, so that we can talk too.
Absolutely. So we already got a little bit of the opera and a sense of what it's about. Could you tell us what this next aria is about? What this particular movement is?
Yeah, so this is basically the bad guy. His name is Tom, and he is hunting through the forest, and Izzy is disguised as a frog, and she is watching him kind of stomp around through the forest and trying to figure out who he is.
If ever there was a way to get children interested in opera, it's things like this.
Yes.
Everyone, I hate everyone, I hate everyone, I hate everyone. My landlady's a shrew.
What's he doing here?
I hate everyone, everyone. I hate everyone, 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 everyone. I hate everyone. I stubbed my toe on my way to work. I tripped up on a rake. Left lying on the garden path, stared straight into a mess of thorns. I heard a voice. My roses, my precious roses. Everyone, I hate everyone. I hate everyone. I hate everyone. I wish I'd never been born. I stubbed my toe today. I stubbed my toe today. My landlady's a shrew. My landlady's a shrew. I've got a bow, got an arrow too. Gonna take aim and shoot whatever's in my way.
Uh-oh.
Please, no! Make him stop!
Hey, mister, what are you doing here? I'm a wild
Please stop! I don't want to die today!
Who says you're going to die?
Did you just talk? But wild boars aren't supposed to talk. Are you a prince will never ever shoot another board again. Cross my heart and hope to die.
What about that rabbit? Will you shoot him?
I don't know. Sure, I like rabbit.
I could be that rabbit.
Forgive me for having to stop it, but please do go and watch the whole thing because it is wonderful. It's really fun. And I'll even make a plug and say that for those of you that aren't opera isn't necessarily the first thing that you go to, that this is an interesting way to experience it. So I want to go ahead and open it up to questions. Are there any questions for Julia Adolphe?
Yeah, and I'll just say that the opera 2 is in progress. So the clip that's up is just a 20-minute excerpt, but really we're looking for a home, and we're looking for commissioners. So hopefully it'll be coming into realization in the coming years.
Dr. Mark Kligman says, who are your compositional influences? That's always the scary question.
Well, so I studied with Stephen Stuckey at Cornell, and I studied with Stephen Hartke at USC, and I think you can definitely hear both of them in my music, especially Steve Stuckey. But before that, I really loved George Crumb. I really grew up loving George Crumb's music. I was also really taken with Kaya Sariaho and Sofia Gubaidulina. I think Gubaidulina and Crumb, both, I was really drawn to sort of how they have this kind of mystical voice, and it's very atmospheric. I also really love the Beatles and Tom Waits, and grew up listening to a lot of 60s rock as well.
Imagining the Beatles and Tom Waits living in the same place as George Crumb is just wonderful, and that tells us so much about your music. And if anyone here hasn't heard of any of those artists, it's worth checking them out. Other questions? I'd be curious. So I definitely heard, if you don't mind me riffing on that for a second, I hear the George Crumb very, very clearly. I hear the Stephen Stuckey and Stephen Hartke. I think I hear where those influences of Beatles and pop music and that sort of thing is coming from. But I wonder if you wouldn't mind just expanding on that just a little bit, especially after hearing some of the more crunchy works that we have toward the end there. It might not always be obvious.
Sure. I think all of my music starts out like it could be a song, and perhaps even a folk song or a pop song. I think that's kind of where it naturally starts, or a modal kind of melody that you might hear in tempo. Honestly, it's just like folk music. Basically, I think is very much where my music starts, and then part of the editing process is basically twisting and turning it so that it, or meshing it with other influences so that it's not just that pure, it's not just a song. It's a song plus there's some, crunchy chords underneath. I think that's what makes it exciting, is when you sort of bring all of your different influences together. But it always starts from a place of song.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions?
Be about anything. Yes.
Sunny Cats. Sunny, would you mind unmuting yourself? Oh, it's the little microphone button for it. There we go.
Is that better?
Perfect.
What is your take on Giancarlo Menotti?
I'm not I remember hearing Menotti in school and really enjoying it. I'm not super familiar, but I really do love that sort of light operatic texture. And yeah, I wish I could speak a little bit more eloquently about that, but yeah.
I hear some of it in
Yeah.
your music. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think so. I think that's right.
That's what I was listening to. Thank you very much. It's
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sunny. Are there any other questions? I want to make sure I give anyone else a chance. Well, with that, I think we have just about reached that point. I do want to give you, Julia, a quick second to remind us where we can find, recordings, etc. And if you wouldn't mind just telling us what we can look for in the next year from you, or the next few months, or.
Sure. Right, the next year.
Yeah, and what is time in quarantine?
Yes. So hopefully you can come this very fall, maybe, or winter. Uh, the LA Philharmonic hasn't set a date for the violin concerto, but I hope it should be this season sometime. So in the 21-22 season, that is the hope. Of course, everything's still up in the air, but that Martin Chalifour, who's the concertmaster of the LA Philharmonic, he will be playing this piece that I'm working on now. So definitely, once that's announced, it would be great, to see you there. And I'm also writing a piece for the Boston Symphony and Gewandhaus Orchestra Leipzig. That should also hopefully be this season, as well as a piece for the Cincinnati Symphony. So lots of orchestral works coming up, and yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Julia, on behalf of the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the Lowell Milken Center for Music of American Jewish Experience, thank you so much for doing this. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Dr. Mark Kligman and Beth Kramer, for all of your assistance on the back end, making sure that everything is running well and people are able to get into this room. So thank you, everybody. And with that, please keep an ear to the ground for our future programming. We hope to see you for our next program with Michael Winograd. Have a great evening, everybody.